It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague in the Danger Zone in Rainford. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
Don't know so much about the danger zone. It's more like the deep end. Good God, it's rained today.
Winter is here. It's. If it wasn't for the fact that it would cost you an arm and a leg to put your heating on, you probably would. I assume you're just burning pieces of paper in your front room.
No, I've got coats.
I like
Big
the way
coats.
you've got 3 girls who live in your house and you're just making them all wear coats.
Well, to be fair, one of them has that much energy that if I just plugged her into the generator, she could power the whole street.
Maybe you should do that. Get it like one of them big Maddie gerbil wheels. Let her go. See how it happens.
Just in case anyone doesn't realise how bizarre the behaviour of my youngest is, in the past year we've taught her how to do archery, start fires, and now she's starting judo. Giving her any number of ways by which to kill me eventually.
I would pay money to watch Neil do any of those activities because they would all be comedy hilarious. So, you know, I assume she got that from Neil's better half.
Or genetic engineering.
Who could say, Neil? Who could say? Let's get on with the show. This week, mains events changed yesterday and today, but we're going to talk some quarterbacks. We're going to talk some fancy reactions to trades. I'm going to talk something that I didn't think we'd ever talk about, which is a franchise sale. We're then going to get on to fancy stuff. Fancy darlings, fancy loser, fancy predictions bound to go wrong, or bound to get very close, but not quite right. Let's get on with the show, though, Neil. Let's start with the main events.
Time now for the main event.
We've been doing this show forever, 10 years in fact, and regularly we talk draft with many people. One of my favourite people to talk draft with every year is when we get Mark Schofield on to talk about the quarterbacks. We did that prior to the 2021 draft, and there was a lot of noise about how good these players were going to be. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, to name but 4. It hasn't gone very well. It's gone nowhere near as well as everyone would have hoped. I don't know about you, Neil. I've started to watch a game every week while also watching Red Zone. And I've become weirdly obsessed with watching Patriots games. I don't really know why. So I watched Wilson versus Jones.
God.
Which was one of the worst quarterback games I've seen in a very long time. And I watched the Washington Commanders more than most. Obviously, we all watched Trevor Lawrence, who seems great from 20 to 20, but in the red zone is Pooh George. And then Justin Fields, who's actually on the only one of these who I would suggest is on the upward path because his coaching staff have finally decided to, you know, use him in the way God intended. But this quarterback class right now, a year and a half in, has major question marks and concerns considering it was supposed to be one of the good ones. Do you expect them all to get better, or is there some way you think this might be a short-term thing and they may be gone soon?
Statistically, all 5 were never going to hit. Because when you get such a concentration of the same position in the first round of the draft, the odds of them all panning out successfully are astronomical. So we saw last year that, you know, if we look at Trevor Lawrence, as we know, underwhelmed, underachieved, underperformed. How much of that was him? How much of it was the situation? Zach Wilson, look, he showed flashes, but also was very raw. Justin Fields was again in an offense that was designed for Andy Dalton, not himself. Mac Jones looked, we were all panicking, thinking they'd found Tom Brady again. But the only one of these, as I say, at the moment, who you can actually look and say is being deployed properly and is executing the offense that in the way it was designed, is Justin Fields, because they've now put the offense in place around him to take advantage of his skill set. I don't know what's going on with New England. This whole thing smacks of just how much control, how much influence did Josh McDaniels have on Belichick. He would just say, leave this with me, we'll be fine. But now the other two clowns are in there, and it's all a mess again. Zach Wilson ain't it. You can tell that he ain't it, and they've already realised it, because they don't want him to throw the ball. And when he does throw the ball, they know bad things happen. How do you throw an interception on a throwaway? This is a very special skill that I think, I would hope a few can repeat, and a few should look to repeat. Throw the ball away, dickhead. You say that there are many questions about these quarterbacks. I think there's just one question that needs answering, and that is, how many of these franchises are going to be looking for quarterbacks again in 2023?
I look at it and I think I'm going to kind of separate them slightly. I look at, say, Trevor Lawrence, and I was listening to a podcast and he was saying his EPA per play outside of the 20s is like 6th in the league. Now, obviously, you're paid to score points. I'm not saying you're not. I think we could both put a tremendously strong point around this being his rookie season. I know he played last year, but let's be honest, clown show. Justin Fields is interesting. If someone would have asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said he's not in Chicago next year and they're in that position. But for whatever reason, it feels like, and we'll see if it continues, something has clicked. And that's a good thing. Zach Wilson's not it. Some teams are not allowed nice things. And I know I'm not convinced by Woody Johnson as a human, but I'm not really sure that the NFL gods have got against the New York Jets. I don't really know. But it's not like they don't give them the opportunity to draft quarterbacks high in the draft, because they do. And it never seems to go very well. Imagine having someone who moves like Patrick Mahomes but has none of the good bits. That's Zach Wilson, right? You can tell that he hasn't got it. It looks like he's guessing. He looks like what I believe we would look like. Do you know? And it's just that I'll take a step back, or I'll take another step back, I'll step to the right, and just, lost. On Jones, I think it's franchise malpractice. It's hubris. And it's hubris by the greatest coach in the history of the NFL. The audacity to believe that you could leave your franchise quarterback in the hands of Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, known throughout the land of people who hold grudges and will bury people for no particular reason other than their own fun. For whatever reason, and you can tell when you watch the games, they design better offense for Bailey Zappi than they do Mac Jones. What is that even about? They don't run the same plays. They run different plays. And the Zappi plays have better chances of succeeding. What the heck are we even doing here? Bill needs to get a grip of that, fire those two fools, and actually get an offensive coordinator in.
By all accounts, what happens is Mac Jones is very detail-oriented, and that he likes to know the why. He doesn't just say, okay, this is the read, 1, 2, 3, put it on him. He likes to know, okay, well, we do this, why are we doing this? And he's not, by all accounts, he's not questioning the why, he just wants to know it. Whereas I'm guessing Bailey Zappi, coming from the scheme he was excelling in college, is just happy for throw it to the open guy. So whether the two clowns running the show don't like someone who wants to know too much because they think they're the smartest people in the room and shouldn't have to explain it to an underling, which is how they see the players, maybe that rubs them up the wrong way, whereas they think Bailey Zappi does as we tell him.
I do look, and and I'm going to include Josh McDaniels in this because it's going tremendously badly there. And I was speaking to Joe Valenzuela on a touchdown review last night. That could be one and done. Him, Patricia, Judge, to some extent O'Brien, although he did win games, Charlie Weiss, the absolute arrogance of men who have got to where they've got to on the coattails of another human blows my mind.
Mike Vrabel has a more successful coaching tree than Bill Belichick.
We were going to do mid-season overreactions, which we didn't get to do because we're doing something else. And I think I could put forward an argument that Mike Vrabel's the best coach in the league. Quite an easy argument. Do I think it's true? No. But I think you could put forward a compelling case to lawyers that he is excellent. He is beyond excellent at his job.
And one thing that we do know is that he loves AJ Brown as well, judging by his reaction on draft day. So anyone who loves AJ Brown must be all right.
Let's move on to the next one, Neil, and talk about Matt Patricia's former home, and that's the Detroit Lions. First of all, where do you stand on the unis? I talked about this last night, and oh no!
No.
See, I think we're old. You see, because I was speaking again, same to Joe Valenzuela, who decreed that he believes the Lions should wear that grey every game.
You're one of the most downtrodden franchises in history.
It's true.
And you're making them wear all grey. I'm not being funny. How can, as a fan, how can you motivate yourself to go and watch, knowing what's going to happen, that they're coming out looking like they're modelling gruel? No. Okay. See, that given the choice with colours, I lean towards the darker. So, which is why I prefer the Chargers midnight blue to the powder blue.
Yeah.
Detroit should be playing in powder blue. That's what they look best in. And I know that if you don't look your best, you're not going to play your best. So let's start there. Take the grey, roll them up, shove them up their arse, and let them play in blue.
Let's move on off Kit Watch. That's for Ollie and his mates, not necessarily for us. They obviously were burned down to the studs by Matt Patricia. We knew they were going to be bad last year, and they were, but there was signs of hope. Their offense looks super fun, and has continued to look super fun in spurts in games, but they're not winning. And they've just traded TJ Hawkinson, which we'll get onto a little bit later from a fancy point of view. But that doesn't necessarily strike me as a we're trying to win move. So, should Dan Campbell be concerned about his job?
Any coach who's had 2 losing seasons, and these are going to be seriously losing seasons. We're not talking 7-9, 6-10. These are going to be well below 500. Of course, you've got to be concerned. The one saving grace, which will probably be, might go against his philosophy and whatnot, but when you also factor in that the GM came with him as well, they haven't had a chance to pick their quarterback yet. They were not saddled. They were given Goff, as the throw-in the Stafford trade. They could probably make the case, look, we're putting the building pieces in place before we draft our guy. We told you we were going to do this. That's why we didn't, that's why people are saying they'll take Malik Willis, the 2nd overall pick, or whatnot. I think all it does is it guarantees that they have to take a quarterback early in 2023. That's the only thing that can save them. And then we'll see how that quarterback goes. Tying back to our earlier discussion, if that quarterback shows growth as a rookie, it buys them a season 4. If it doesn't, then they bring in a new coach, a new offensive coordinator, new staff, and it ruins that rookie for 2 years because he's got to learn another new system. But that's the only thing that can save them, because the defense is pish. Offensively, they look good until they don't.
Yeah, the issue I've got, and I agree with you 100%, and it's the move you would make, but the reason that the Lions are losing games is not really because of Jared Goff. It's because they can't stop anyone. Like, this week's game against the Green Bay Packers is the opposite of the irresistible force meets the immovable object. Do you know what I mean? This is Green Bay Packers offense versus Lions defense. If the Packers can't get going against this defense, they've got serious issues. I'm really, I speak now to Taib, and he's very defensive towards the attack on Dan Campbell, and I understand it because people saw Hard Knocks. People want to play for him. It seems that way, and that's good, right? And I think we underestimate how bad they were under Patricia and what they had to do to rebuild it. But I think last year gave people a false sense of security. I'm sure we've got in our NFC North preview, we talk about can they make the playoffs kind of idea, and they're like 1-6, and you just like you want to be in a situation where you want to see progression. I think this could be seen as a good year to lose games now. I wonder if there's a lot of this is our Super Bowl this Sunday at home against the Packers, and then maybe if we win this one and we don't win many more, then we may be alright with how the season's gone. Let's get on to fancy reactions, Neil. Trades, riddled with trades yesterday. We're going to focus on the offensive ones and how they impact fantasy. First one is TJ Hawkinson to the Vikings. Obviously, Irv Smith, who you picked, and we'll get on to in your fancy darlings. High ankle sprain. Sounds like out for the season. It was originally a high ankle sprain. I assume it's much worse than that. What does Hawkinson bring to the Vikings, and do you expect him to produce early?
Well, one thing that Hawkinson has a massive advantage on Irv Smith, and I say I'm not a tape grinder, but I do know this from looking at the statistics, is that Hawkinson is a true inline tight end. So he can be, and was, going all the way back to Iowa, he was a proper enforcer. He was a proper blocker. Well, that helps, on a team like this who, like to run the ball. Not as much as, in the old days they did. So it's going to get Hawkinson on the field. Irv Smith was, as I said last week, had a 15% target share. Never more than 18, never less than 12, but wasn't really doing anything with him. Whereas we've seen Hawkinson this year has flashed, especially, in times where other people haven't been around and he's been able to pick up the slack. Well, he was competing with a slot wide receiver in Detroit for the main targets. Now he's got Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen who's still getting by. That's going to create much better matchups for Hawkinson. I'm not saying he's going to be like the tight end one from now on, but I think he's certainly someone who you can look at and you probably can tell yourself, I don't need to stream this position anymore. I'm okay for the rest of the season.
Next one, Neil. Jeff Wilson moves to the Miami Dolphins, joins or returns to a kind of Mike McDaniel. I sent you a quote in relation to, or did you send me? I can't remember.
You sent me the first one.
Yeah, which is McDaniel talking about him, which is basically the verbal version of the picture of the dog inside the X-ray chest. So do you expect Wilson to get a lot of carries for the Miami Dolphins going forward?
He's going into a situation again where he's got a ground. He's got he's going to have to share the backfield with Raheem Mostert, who we all love because of how explosive he is, but we all hate because of how brittle he seems to be. So there is a good chance that it's going to be a committee. Jeff Wilson could be the lead of that committee. But one thing that we have seen this year from the Dolphins, and this is why we love Mike McDaniels, is he doesn't want to overcomplicate shit. He knows he's got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Get them the ball. Don't worry about anything else. Don't look for balance. Screw balance. Get your best players the ball. They're not going to be run heavy. This is not a Shanahan. It's a Shanahan-inspired scheme, but it's not a Shanahan offense. They don't play as slow as the 49ers. They pass a lot more than the 49ers over-expected. So Wilson might look into some, goal line work, but he's not going to be a 20-carry guy. So I think he's probably he probably was better as a he could have RB1 weeks when he was in San Francisco because he was more likely to get the volume. Whereas now I think we're looking at hoping he gets a few high-value touches in the red zone and whatnot.
I mean, I noticed that, like, Edmonds and who's the starting running back at the moment for the Dolphins? Mostert of, like, in minus yards kind of for expected, and Wilson's like plus 100. So, maybe it's the spark they need. I agree with you though. This team lives and dies by Hill and Waddle, and why wouldn't you? So yeah.
I mean, at least it's one less body because obviously Chase Edmonds went to Denver.
Yeah, of course.
Where he just makes that whole thing messier anyway. So.
Well, yeah. And I'm not talking about him. Neil, one of our favourites, quote unquote, we talked about a lot, especially last year, was Chase Claypool, who moves to the Bears for a second round pick. Let's not talk about the pick, but let's see how do you think he helps Fields short term?
I don't know. I mean, there's one thing that we know about the Pittsburgh Steelers: they can find and produce and develop wide receivers. They soured on Chase Claypool very quickly. And lest we forget, this is a coaching staff that put up with Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell's bullshit for quite some time, and they made it abundantly clear straight away, oh no, we're done with this. So I don't know whether the chances are, knuckle down, crack on, maybe it'll inspire him, or maybe he should just do what Matt Kelly said back in the day he should do and just turn into a tight end.
Naheem Hines moves, Neil. How do you think he fares?
Buffalo have made it an absolute open secret since the off-season that they wanted a pass-catching running back. They had the J.D. McKissick dalliance. They drafted James Cook. They've tried to shoehorn Zach Moss into this role over the years. It just hasn't worked. So they've got the quintessential. Look, might get 3 or 4 carries a game, but he's a handy safety valve as a check down for our quarterback, who we don't want to run so much. It's a question of can they get that in place between now and the end of the season. I say to Josh Allen, don't take off unless you have to, use the check down. He's not going to be a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. He destroys James Cook's value. Zach Moss has obviously gone the other way as well. It's a Singletary, it's a Naeem Hines backfield. It's not great. So it probably, they cap each other. It's not something to be too excited about unless something were to happen to the other.
As a man who picked up James Cook in this dynasty draft this year, this is disappointing news as he's not seen the field. Speaking of dynasty, Neil, fan I wanted to get onto is Calvin Ridley goes to the Jaguars. Obviously not playing this year. Still has to apply really to be next year. If he does get back on the field, what do you expect with him and Lawrence?
Yeah, indefinite ban for gambling, but only 11-game ban for other offences. This is the move I loved the most because we've seen Calvin Ridley operate at a very high level and as a deep threat for another quarterback of I don't want to say similar skill set, but Trevor Lawrence is definitely more in that pocket passer mould rather than the functional mobility, flat out running quarterback than, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson of that ilk. Assuming that Calvin Ridley can come back and be anything like the Calvin Ridley he was the last time we saw him, which bear in mind is going to be getting on for 2 years, I love this move because it's what that offense needed. He's not a burner, but he's a very good receiver at going deep. So he gives the offense that element to get it all away from Trevor Lawrence. So he's not having to dink and dunk, which he doesn't seem to be very good at. So it helps, it gives a vertical element to the offense, and it's another playmaker. You're not going to see how good Trevor Lawrence is if he's having to rely on Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Marvin Jones, and maybe Jamal Swagnew. So while
I think you just made a name up there.
These people, those players have helped for what we had last year, but don't stop. You have to keep improving. So I loved that move.
Brilliant stuff, Neil. Let's get on to the final story, which came out earlier today. Forbes announced that Dan Snyder had spoken to, I believe, Bank of America to look for potential investment / sales in relation to removing himself from ownership of the Washington Commanders. We thought this day would never come, and it seems like Jim Irsay has a lot more power or is a lot more in the know than we think. You know more, we've talked about it on this show a lot. My love for said franchise has dissipated over the years, mainly due to the fact that it's been tremendously poorly run, and been a embarrassment to itself and the NFL for over 20 years, I think we should say. The last few years, in terms of the name and the attempts to keep hold of it, when all things said that it should be changed, the disgraceful working practices and conditions for many of the people who work in there, and just the poorly run organisation. All that being said, and to prove that, you know, the NFL is undefeated in money market situations, Forbes values the Washington franchise at $5.6 billion with a B. It's a team with no team, with barely a name, with a stadium that should be set on fire, and people are saying they'll probably get $7 billion. It's difficult, really, I think, for people in the UK or you know, outside of the US to understand, you know, the importance of a franchise in that city. Although at the moment they're in Landover, Maryland, but you know what I mean. And Dallas Cowboys, Green Bay Packers, Chicago Bears, possibly New York Giants,
Steelers.
That's probably the list. That's nothing against all the other teams, by the way. And I'm, you know, Patriots, Bills, Eagles, Chiefs, all those teams. They're not Washington in Washington. I was listening to Tony Kornheiser a few weeks ago and it broke on the Irsay thing, and he raised a very good point. Once a year they were on Monday Night Football against a big team. Probably an NFC's team. Probably Cowboys. And it'd be in RFK. And they get a visitor. And that visitor would be what they would describe as the leader of the free world. And the owner would get to sit with the leader of the free world for the whole game. No other team can do that. Does this team need a new stadium? Yes, it does. Is the District of Columbia willing to have that stadium? I believe it is, but it's not willing to have Daniel Snyder as the owner when they build it. Will someone pay $7 billion to own one of the 32 NFL franchises, and a possibility of one with a massive disenfranchised fan base that could be brought back? Oh yes, I believe they would.
Absolutely.
If you're buying the, I don't mean to be rude here, if you're buying the fucking Carolina Panthers, I think someone's going to be all right buying the Washington Commanders.
I was re-listening to From Darkness to Dynasty, you know, the story of the first 40 years of the New England Patriots by Jerry Thornton, one of the funniest football books ever written. And he pointed out that in the old days, it was seen that the position of utmost preeminent power and influence used to be as probably a senator, but there's 100 senators and there's only 32 NFL franchises. The public own one of them, so there's only 31. And plus the fact that, you know, if you own an NFL team and can't make money, you're a congenital idiot. So the chance so we've got to pay $7 billion, and there has to be a majority owner. Can't be everyone owning 10%. That doesn't work. They're not going to fly that. Of course someone's going to do it. All I would say, and I'd say you've been very, erudite and put it very well, this is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end.
No.
It's not even the end of the beginning. He is still in power, despite the, oh no, he's not hands-on. He's still there.
Yeah, absolutely.
This will drag on because he thinks, from what I've read and what everyone tells us, he still thinks he's got the NFL by the short and curlies, and I don't think he has anymore because they were prepared to put up with a lot of bullshit, but now he's not bringing in the money.
Well, not only is he not bringing in the money, Neil, there are stories that have been corroborated that actually he's taking money out of their pockets, and that's one thing. So he's taking money out of their pockets. He also can't fill a stadium for one of the biggest franchises in the NFL. That is clearly unacceptable.
Yeah. I think it's got to a point, I think, where the NFL owners, I dare say he thinks he's got dirt on them. I dare say he probably has on some of them. But I think they've got to an extent where probably most of them are looking around saying, so what? As long as it isn't as bad as what he's done, we can live with that. Let's get rid of him.
And that is why, and we didn't really talk about it, but it's why Jim Irsay, being the owner who came out and said this guy needs to go, was the right person. Because if anyone's got skeletons in their closet, and someone who openly admits to having skeletons in his closet, by the way, is Jim Irsay, right? Had issues with drugs and what have you. So he's basically gone he's basically fronted him and said, do your worst. Mm-hmm. And it looks like Snyder's used his bluff and they've said, we don't believe you. And at the moment, it seems like he's gone, okay, well, maybe I should sell. I mean, I understand you only, you can be rich, and he's obviously tremendously rich. But as you said, there's only 31 of these, and that's a power that he obviously wanted to keep. It seems like, hopefully, that he's not going to be keeping it for very much longer. The richest person kind of in that area, or around there, would have been Jeff Bezos. However,
he already owns the NFL now, so
correct. So that's an interesting one, but we will see. In terms of names, I haven't seen anything come out yet, but when we do and when we get some concrete stuff, we'll do it again. But Neil, let's get on with the show. Let's get fantasy heavy and let's go into Fancy Darling.
Hello, darling.
Neil, last week 0-2, overall 5-11. Bad couple of weeks. You picked Daniel Jones. He was quarterback 25 in 9 points, 9.04 points. It was a loss. Irv Smith was tight end 22, 4 receptions for 28 yards and a high ankle sprain, so you basically killed the season off.
The heartbreaking thing is, if you actually look at the tight end receptions for the Vikings as a whole and add all the fancy points together, you've got a top 8 fancy tight end. So I cannot be blamed if Kevin O'Connell doesn't believe you should feature and feed one tight end above all else. I can't be held responsible for that.
Well, that's lucky, Neil. Maybe we'll give you a partial credit. Let's find out who you're going with this week. Who's your first pick, please?
Well, I've already mentioned him. It's Justin Fields. I say the last 4 weeks, he's the quarterback 2 in terms of total fantasy points. This has been fantastic. He's chipping in, and obviously he's chipping in with his legs. He has the second most rushing yards among all quarterbacks. 424, second only to Lamar Jackson. The matchup is lovely because the Dolphins' defense is not good.
No.
They've allowed the they've allowed the 4th most passing yards this season, but most importantly, the 5th most rushing yards to quarterbacks. So, if you need quarterback this week, even if you don't, if you your own one, it's a toss-up. I'd go with Justin Fields.
Who's your second pick, Neil?
Second pick, I'll go with a defense this week. I'll go with the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals defense, it's weird. They're not a unit that you look at and are particularly scared of, you'd think. But What if I told you that they've actually allowed the second lowest completion percentage, third lowest, sorry, in the NFL this season?
I'd be shocked.
Well, they have. They're also third in QB knockdowns. So obviously they're getting to the QB, they're just not getting to him in time. But they're bringing the pressure, and that's eventually going to hold. This season they've also only allowed 7 touchdown passes while intercepting 6. They're playing the Carolina Panthers now. The Panthers seem to have got a bit of a spark lately with PJ Walker, as long as they keep the helmets on. But PJ Walker has still thrown 5 touchdowns in his career against 9 interceptions, and in his 3 starts this season he has absorbed 6 sacks. So I think if you need a defense this week, you could do a lot worse than the Bengals.
Love it, Neil. Let's get on and talk fancy loser. Neil, last week you picked Nick Chubb, expected him to struggle. He did not. He did the opposite of struggle. He was running back 6, 25.4 points, 101 yards and 2 scores. It was a really dominant performance, and I know why you picked the Bengals this week, but they were bad on Monday night. Neil, who's your loser this week?
Just seemed to me that last week was a really good one for running backs. It just, I'm not... I suppose I do have like one foot in the door and that they don't matter. They do matter in fantasy football. They just matter this season. Don't start thinking about them 3 or 4 years down the line.
Absolutely.
The person I've gone for this week to avoid is not a running back. It is a wide receiver, and it's Allen Robinson. I know some people are thinking maybe, A-Rob, it's finally happening. That offense is shite. It's broken. They can't protect Matt Stafford. They just cannot. It's getting worse. Stafford's getting dinged up. Maybe Cooper Kupp doesn't play. Maybe Robinson will get all these targets. And maybe he won't. So, if you're expecting Allen Robinson to be anything more than a high-end wide receiver 3 this week, you're going to be very, very disappointed.
That makes me sad, mainly due to the fact I thought, he'd be good this year. But he's clearly not. Let's get on with fancy predictions, bound to go wrong. Neil, 0-2 last week, but by Jove, were we close but no cigar, close only counting horseshoes and hand grenades, all that keeper. I said that Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill would both have over 150 yards and 1 touchdown. They didn't, but let's see what they did do. Hill had 31.5 points and Jalen Waddle had 30.6. Wide receiver 3 and 4 respectively. Hill, 12 catches, 188 yards without a touchdown. Waddle, 8 catches, 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. A wonderful performance against, as we described, a dire Detroit Lions defense.
Have you seen the stat about Tyreek Hill? He has at least 160 yards in all the even-numbered weeks this season.
Breaking news: Tyreek Hill's good. Just want to make it clear that again, we did. I don't think we didn't talk about it because Bradley Chubb was a defensive player, but the Miami Dolphins have turned the Trey Lance trade into Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb. Seems okay to me. And in theory, all this started from the Laramie Tunsil trade. But anyway,
what I love though is the Dolphins are 5-3, and everyone seems to have forgotten this.
Yeah, well, they are. I speak to Callan Squires, who's a massive Dolphins fan, and he would argue they're 5-0. But yes, I know what you mean. I also highlighted that they're unfortunately one hit away from needing a new quarterback, which is not good, but unfortunately where we are. You highlighted that Pollard would be running back 1. He was running back 4. He had, and this is unbelievable, he had 33.7 points, 131 yards, 1 reception, and he also had 3 touchdowns. And somehow there was 3 better running backs than that. Absolute and utter insanity. Do you know what's the only thing that's more insane than that? Jerry Jones coming out in his press conference saying, "We go where Zeke Elliott goes. Oh my God, lock that man up." Actually, I don't want him locked up, because if he did, that team might win something.
No, by all means, keep going, Jerry.
This week, Neil, I will go first. We talk bad defences, and let's focus on bad secondaries. One team that's a bad secondary is the Washington Commanders secondary. It tries really hard, but it's not very good. What do squeaky wheels get, Neil?
The grease.
They do. Do you know a man who hasn't seen much target recently? Mr. Justin Jefferson. So he will be wide receiver 1 in the whole of fantasy this week, and will definitely get over 150 yards in what can only be described as the Kirk Cousins revenge game.
The Cousins Bowl.
Neil, who's your pick in fantasy prediction bound to go wrong?
There was a player who'd been putting up consistent production and consistent opportunity over the last few weeks. The only thing that had been missing from his game was the fact he seemed allergic to the end zone. Well, last week, Evan Ingram finally got to the paint and scored a touchdown for the Jaguars. So he's going to build on that. And this week against the Las Vegas Raiders, Evan Ingram will finish as the tight end 1 in fantasy in PPR format.
Love it, love it, love it. Neil, that's it for the show. A long one, but a good one. Before we come back next week, where can people catch you?
Follow me on Twitter at ndutton13. You can find my stuff at Numberfire, at Rotaviz, at Player Profiler, at 4for4 Football, and don't forget to pick up this month's edition of the Gridiron magazine.
Want to catch me again? Go to the touchdown.co.uk touchdown review podcast. I had Callum, Thomas, Taib, and Joe. Callum went to Texas A&M versus Ole Miss, got to ask Lane Kiffin a question, which then was broadcast across multiple outlets. Then Thomas went to the London game, that was shit. And then we talked to Taib and Joe on multiple other things. I am at Mangy7, Neil is at Ndutton13, combined with at waxing_lyrical. This has been a top show, but these top guys are out.